The Horror at Versailles by Mark Weisgerber. I saw it again last night, Bernardo said, as he reached over beyond his friend to grab at some French fries. Bernardo, I really don't think that's necessarily the case. His friend looked over at him, eyes focusing him square in the face, as he continued. I'm telling you, man, it's towards the southwest corner of the park, out towards the back fences this time. It was big as a house. I don't know. I didn't like the flavor of the thing. Bernardo, there's nothing out there. We've been over this. It's nothing. You work too hard. Jacques put his hands up against the steering wheel again, turning his face hard to his friend. Beyond them, the lights of the chateau began to rise on the hill, the distant sounds of music trilling between the fountains below. I tell you, there's something out there in the bush, Jacques. Something mean and hateful and moving fast. Have you worked till the 1 o'clock hour? I don't suppose you'd see it. I've seen it twice this week. It's something alive. I'm certain of it. It moves fast. Maybe too fast to be a man, or even to capture. Bernardo paused in his musing to lick his lips. His face had grown a frantic look, one Jacques had been getting to know quite well. I bet it comes back tonight. We could, we should go look for it. What do you think? It would not be hard. You're crazy, hombre. It's likely nothing out there, just the wind. Or the kids pulling a prank on you. I've been out that way too many times, walked those same grounds far too long to think that there's something actually out there. Walking, even. A man, a creature. Nothing gets in and out of this town from except the kids from time to time. As he said this, Bernardo relaxed a bit, as if in pondering. Yes, I suppose you're right, he said. He sat, taking a turn, nibbling at his sandwich. Jacques also sat, nibbling his own, thinking of the typical trespassers out there. Beyond, the night fell quickly in the park. In all these long years that he'd known Bernardo, he'd never once began to question his friend, not only in the dark nights, not only in the state of his sanity, but as of late he had begun to wonder. Bernardo, after tentative pause, turned back to his friend. Do you want to know what I think? No, Jacques said to his friend. No, I think the time for thinking is over. Perhaps we should just get back to work. I think I'm going to get out back that way tonight, I say. Try to capture this thing on film. I only tell you because do not think it is wise to do this thing alone, at least not without telling somebody. Alone? What do you mean? Well, this is my third time this week. You haven't tried anything until now? No, no. Cameras can be. My camera phone does not work quite so well at night. You know this. Come on. Besides, you know this land better than anybody. As he said this, Jacques packed up the remainder of his sandwich, put the car into drive, and began to go. They drove back towards the main part of the park, the manager's hut, in complete silence, out beyond the long expanses of grassland between the trees. Above them, somewhere, the chestnuts clickered and clackered in the fading light, headlamps careening off of the golf cart below them. Below their feet, somewhere, the gravel crunched under heavy tires. I don't think you mad, my friend. I think there are better things to do this night. Besides, we have the park to worry about. The park was a considerable item ahead of them. It was an avenue of broad things between massive chestnut trees that seemed to sprout fingers and avenues on all sides. On and on it went for eons upon eons, a huge, gigantic grassland that was broken up occasionally by trees. This land had been long, old, built far before their own time, even. And it scared Jacques considerably to think not only about how big the park itself was, but how old its history. Time had a way of catching up with things. Time had a way of catching up with himself. I don't think that you should go out this eve, Jacques said again, more urgently. In fact, I don't think you should go out again anytime soon. He glanced towards the manager's shed, occasionally thinking that perhaps his boss, Fernando, might be watching. You're starting to scare me, Esse. Scare us, even. Enrique has started asking questions this morning, you know. He has? Bernardo asked, questioningly. His eyes began to falter. But it was true. Enrique had indeed started mentioning Bernardo's antics ever since he had come in from breakfast. Bernardo had spent far too long out once again, and most of the company had thought him smoking the dope again. The Park Service had even started debating about installing video monitors even just the week before. At least Bernardo's cart several times had been seen tramping off to the back areas beyond. This new development that he mentioned made sense, but it still startled Jacques considerably. Meanwhile, Bernardo looked him straight in the eye, questioning. You're saying you don't trust me much, Essay? No, that's not what I'm saying, Bernardo. I'm saying you should just wait a moment, let all this sink in. You think you're moving too fast. There's nothing out there, my friend. Nothing? Bernardo, as he said this, looked around him. Jacques had to admit that the park itself could be quite frightening at night. Years ago, the Park Service had built small gridded fences between each of the bisected avenues they now drove, which gave the avenues themselves a very frightening feel. Several of them were painted green. Most had begun to rot and were in dire need of paint. To the outsiders and the tourists, this all could be a little bit disalarming, but Jacques had worked here for far too long to consider that. But it wasn't impossible that something could change, was it? Something new that none of them could have known? Many times the local kids continued to sneak in. Jacques, what do you think? It would be a good night for us to go out. No, 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 Bernardo. I said no. You really want someone like me out there? Jacques didn't really know what to feel. The night, the sunburn upon his shoulders had begun to twang a bit from the new leaves that had flown in, small bits of dust and tree bark that settled on his forehead. After a while, he thought up a clever answer. Maybe we should check out the southwest corners in the morning. Sometime long ago, one of the old queens had lived in this. It made Jacques think of terrible things in the night, of beheadings, of loud sounds of tramping feet. Meanwhile, they pulled up on their golf carts, listening to the electric hum soothe their nerves. The trees that happened to stand around them, carved into long straight tunnels by the hedge clippers, like some sort of ships that had sprung to life and floated into the sky. Around them, the dippled forest began to settle, and for once, Jacques began to feel unnerved. Perhaps it was the discussion of Bernardo that had started to frighten him so. You see what I mean, Essay? Indeed, the building upon the hill began to glow with the first lights, giving it an eerie, hilarious, terrible feel. You see that up there too, Essay? Tonight, the rich ladies are doing a mock dance. It'll be fun up there to be with the stubborn, sunburned assholes, no? Jacques chuckled, thinking quietly to himself. He had very much wanted to do something like that. In fact, he had long dreamed of going up to that hill, putting on a costume, perhaps trying his hand at the dance. He was terrible at the dance, but he very much enjoyed the prospect of going up there. Still, his ancestors done the same thing? He thought they had, watching the old kings and queens from afar, perhaps from the near stable yards across the street, where now cars were lined instead of horses had once reigned as their masters. After a while, though, he shook these thoughts from his head. Listen, Bernardo, Enrique wanted me to talk to you personally about this. He's worried. I'm worried too now, listening to all of this. Beside him, the burly Italian quieted, listening deeply now. How so? He asked. Around them, the park began to hum with their new electricity. We shouldn't say anything more about this, perhaps. No, no, it is fine. Continue. Well, just don't go out there tonight, or it'll be your ass on the line. I get this, Essay, but if I don't go out that way, would you cover for me? Jacques sat back, perturbed, thinking thoughts. Finish your shift tonight, early even. And if you want, I can explain to Enrique. I'll go take a look, I promise you on that, but then I come right back. What if it's monsters you see, Essay? You've heard all the stories I have to say. Well, it was true. True that the park became far more frightening at night. As Jacques turned into the nearest part of the southwest corner, he could not help but shudder in a slight fright. The Park Service had been talking for years about installing infrared sensors in addition to the cameras, but it was just his simple spotlight that illuminated the trees now. The higher ups always balked when budget time came around, and for this he hated them. In the meantime, he stepped out and began to look around into the impossible dark that was beginning to grow around him. He shuddered to himself, thinking of the stories the staff had told of the kings of old. They could not help but wonder at this strange place with its fingers going out of avenues going out on, endless miles almost beneath strange fissures and cracks of old rocks. It was told that the kings had old orgies in the grottos, and of other darker things that possibly used to dwell in the wells or dells around them. The park was thousands, if not that magical word, millions of acre long, big, and his job, Jacques had never seen anything like that. The only closest thing he could have was the stories of the village cook. I'm telling you, bro, they have all these kinds of stories of strange half men that used to live in the woods. Creatures, even, man, creatures. Do you think that all these old kings had only their dungeons or came here to hunt deer only? No, they fed peasants to the things that were out in the woods. I'm telling you, all of this has purpose. Secret symbols and sigils, and every inch of the ground is now tainted, older than the sky is old. In his head, Jacques could hear Bernardo tick off all the sights and sounds as he'd laugh at the old cook. But what if these strange things are just as mine, layovers of a different remnant, eh, Ara? Sure, sure, old cook. Whatever you say. Now there was this. Jacques didn't know what to think. He'd had plenty of time to check out the park at his leisure during the years, but it was still a massive place, still fit for kings despite its current state. Often it was some local kids that had snuck in after dark with a six-pack of beer to drink and destroy parts of the property as they sung national anthems in the light. He had seen dozens of things like this over the times, frightening things that scared him sometimes. He illuminated his torch beyond the nearest glow of the trees, hoping to startle things out of the bushes. It was useless, empty even. He turned to turn back, the light catching just the last futile grays around him. But what was this? He turned his light back again, noticing an empty beer can, still foaming in the afternoon light. He quickly searched his searchlight around further into the underbrush, listening for footsteps that he imagined to be all around. Hello? He called out to anybody. If anyone's there, speak up. This is security. I am not in the mood to arrest people tonight, but if you come forward now, we will take you home without advice. Yet around him, only silence beckoned. But this could not be. He stepped closer, looking at the beer can, fizzing its empty contents onto the ground. He reached down, feeling it, and it was still fairly chill under his hands. Yet there was no cooler, there was no blanket, no sounds of a picnic or people anywhere near. This troubled him greatly, and he looked around again. Security? Hello? Again, he spoke to nothing but empty trees. Yeah, it's just nothing, he said, stepping back towards his golf cart, not minding the sights that played before him.